balance desperation as they confront a monstrous werewolf. Behemoth, immune to their potent defenses, feel the tension as the elders, beings of ancient power, vanish, leaving behind a community grappling with fear and uncertainty. Dive into the sinister plans of the necromancer, whose dark intelligence threatens to alter the balance of power forever. This tale of survival, alliance, and betrayal will keep you on the edge of your seat, questioning who the real monsters are. Crimson Dawn, echoes of darkness, where every shadow hides a secret and every victory could be a trap. Chapter 1. The Alliance's Resolve. In the dimly lit war room of the camp, a meeting of grave importance was underway. Varric and the other elders sat alongside the camp leaders, their faces etched with the weight of their discussion. The threat of the undead army, with its newfound abominations, loomed over them like a dark cloud. Varric addressed the room with a solemn tone. The undead army is evolving at a rate we haven't seen before. These abominations pose a significant threat, not just to you, but to our existence as well. We must stop them before they grow too strong. Elana, the camp leader, nodded in agreement. We've seen their capabilities firsthand. Their strength and numbers are increasing. We need a definitive plan to halt their advance. One of the elders, Elara, spoke next, her voice tinged with an uncharacteristic sense of urgency. Our survival is now intertwined with yours. Though it is unusual for our kind to rely on humans, this alliance has become essential. We must combine our strengths to defeat this enemy. Alex, now a seasoned strategist, chimed in. We need to exploit their weaknesses. Silver has been effective against the werewolves, and the Elders' shadow powers work against the regular undead. But we need a new approach for these mutated abominations. The group delved into a deep strategic discussion, exploring various tactics and weapons that could be effective against the diverse threats. Varric suggested using their knowledge of the undead's behavior to set traps and ambushes, while Elara proposed a series of coordinated strikes using both human and vampire forces to weaken their enemies' defenses. As the chapter closed, the meeting ended with a renewed sense of determination. Plans were set in motion to gather intelligence, strengthen defenses, and prepare for a large-scale offensive. This alliance, once formed out of necessity, had grown into a bond of mutual respect and reliance. Crimson Dawn, echoes of darkness, began with a unified front, as humans and vampires braced to face their greatest challenge yet, an endeavor that would require every ounce of their combined strength and cunning. Chapter 2. The Necromancer's Insight. Amidst the ruins of the Alpha's fallen kingdom, the Necromancer stood in contemplation. He hovered over one of his grotesque abominations, a being born of his dark alchemy, now lifeless and still. The creature bore no visible marks or wounds, presenting a mystery as to how it had been vanquished. The Necromancer's eyes, glowing with an unsettling light, scanned the lifeless form. His fingers trailed over its cold, twisted flesh, probing for clues. Time seemed to stand still as he delved into his profound understanding of biology and necromancy, seeking answers in the creature's silent testament. Suddenly, he paused, his gaze lifting towards the darkened sky. A moment of realization seemed to wash over him, an epiphany born of his enhanced intelligence and sinister knowledge. The air around him grew charged with the weight of his thoughts. Could it be that the necromancer had unraveled the mystery of the creature's demise? Had he comprehended the elusive power of the elders and their shadow forms? His mind, a vortex of twisted genius, might have indeed devised a strategy to counteract the elusive and intangible nature of the Elder's abilities. With a barely perceptible nod, the necromancer issued a silent command. The undead legion, an army of monstrosities and intelligent zombies, began to mobilize. They departed from the remnants of the Alpha's territory, an exodus marked by eerie discipline and purpose. The undead army set out on a long march back towards their sprawling metropolis, the heart of the necromancer's dark empire. As they moved, the necromancer's presence at the forefront served as a chilling herald of his next move in this deadly game of power. The chapter closed on this ominous procession, leaving a trail of questions in its wake. Had the necromancer indeed found a way to overcome the Elder's powers? What new horrors would he unleash upon the world? Crimson Dawn, Echoes of Darkness, continued to weave its tale of intrigue and survival, with each faction bracing for the next chapter in this unending war. Chapter 3, The Pact of Shadows. In the camp, a palpable tension hung in the air as scouts rushed in with urgent reports. They informed the gathered leaders and elders that the undead legion was moving, inching steadily towards their metropolis. The information was critical, and a meeting was quickly convened to discuss their response. Varric, representing the elders, spoke with a sense of immediacy. We must intercept the undead legion before they can reach their metropolis. Once there, they will regroup and become an even greater threat. With the night still young, we can use our shadow abilities to reach them swiftly. He paused, his eyes meeting those of the camp leaders. However, for such an endeavor, we will require significant strength. We need to feed, and feed well, to ensure our powers are at their peak. The camp leaders, Elena, Alex, and Captain Knox, exchanged concerned glances. The request was heavy, but the gravity of the situation was undeniable. Understanding the necessity of the moment, the elders proposed a solution. We will need twice the number of sacrifices to fully empower ourselves for this task, Varric stated solemnly. Elena, though troubled, nodded in agreement. Alex and Captain Knox stepped forward, offering themselves as the first sacrifices. It was a gesture to demonstrate their trust in the elders and the severity of their common plight. The scene that unfolded next highlighted the parasitic nature of the elders' existence. The camp members gathered, some with resignation, others with a sense of duty, as the elders fed. This act, though disturbing, was accepted as a necessary evil, a grim exchange for the protection and power the elders provided. Once their hunger was satiated, the elders' forms seemed to gain an ethereal strength, their eyes glowing with renewed vigor. Without a word, they dispersed into the shadows, becoming one with the darkness as they set out on their critical mission. The chapter closed with the camp in a state of somber anticipation. The alliance with the elders, born out of necessity, had led to this moment of sacrifice and hope. As the elders vanished into the night, the camp braced for the outcome of this daring interception, aware that the fate of their world hung in the balance. Crimson Dawn, Echoes of Darkness, continued to unfold, a tale of uneasy alliances and desperate measures in the face of overwhelming darkness. Chapter 4, The Necromancer's Proposition. The march of the undead legion came to an abrupt standstill as they encountered an unexpected blockade. 4 shadowy figures, the elders in their true forms, stood defiantly in the path of the advancing horde. The necromancer, observing from a distance, allowed a subtle smile to creep across his lips. With a flick of his hand, he commanded the front lines of zombies and monstrous abominations to charge at the spectral figures. As the undead surged forward, the elders, embodiments of ancient power, moved with supernatural swiftness. They weaved through the army, their shadowy forms a blur, leaving a trail of fallen undead in their wake. It was as though a vast, dark cloud had passed over the battlefield, the Legion dropping like flies under its shadow. After the initial wave of undead had been decimated, the Elders resumed their positions, once again forming an impenetrable barrier. The remaining undead hesitated, their numbers significantly reduced. Then, a startling development unfolded. A small group of robed figures emerged from the undead ranks, carrying a tattered white flag. The necromancer himself walked at their forefront, his presence commanding even in this gesture of truce. The Elders, still shrouded in their shadowy forms, moved forward to meet the approaching group. As they stood face to face, the necromancer began to speak in a deep, guttural voice, each word seeming to strain against his undead nature. "I know who you are. I know why you're here. I understand your powers, but I also know a way to stop it." The Elders listened, their confusion evident even in their ethereal state. The necromancer held up the head of an experimented abomination, using it as a grotesque visual aid. He detailed his studies on the effects of their powers, unveiling his understanding of their shadow manipulation and its effectiveness against the undead. Then came his most shocking revelation. "What if I could show you a way that you no longer need the humans?" he proposed. The chapter closed on this tense, uncertain moment. The necromancer's knowledge and offer hung in the air like a dark promise. What did he know about the Elders' powers that they didn't? And what could this mean for the fragile alliance between humans and vampires? Crimson Dawn, echoes of darkness, continued to unravel its complex web of survival, power, and potential betrayal. Chapter 5. The Proposal of Power. On the desolate battlefield, a strange and tense parley unfolded between the Elders and the necromancer. Around them, the remnants of the undead army watched in silent anticipation. The necromancer resumed speaking, his voice resonating with a depth that seemed to transcend his undead form. "I have delved into the realms of genetics, genealogy, and biology far beyond what was known in your ancient times," he began. "Your need to feed on human blood is not merely a habit. It is a requirement, a source of power embedded in your genetic makeup. But what if there's another source of power? One that could free you from your dependence on humans and potentially grant you even greater strength." Varric, the eldest among the Elders, stepped forward, his form momentarily becoming more defined in the shadows. "Your words intrigue us, necromancer, but they also warrant skepticism," Varric replied, his voice echoing centuries of wisdom. "Our existence has spanned millennia, and never have we encountered an alternative to sustain our kind. What makes you think you have discovered such a source?" The necromancer met Varric's gaze with an unflinching stare, his eyes glowing with a sinister intelligence. "My research into the undead has uncovered secrets that even your ancient minds have not fathomed. The virus that animates me and my creations holds keys to powers and energies that you have yet to understand. It is not merely a curse, but a wellspring of untapped potential." As the necromancer spoke, it became evident that his intelligence might indeed match or even surpass that of Varric's. His knowledge of the modern sciences, combined with his experience as an undead, provided him with unique insights into life, death, and the energies that flow between. The chapter ended with this tense but intriguing dialogue. The offer made by the necromancer held both promise and peril. Could the Elders trust this being, Once human, now a master of death and reanimation. And what would this new power source mean for their ancient existence? Crimson Dawn, echoes of darkness, continued to weave a complex tale of ancient knowledge clashing with modern science, set against the backdrop of a world struggling to find balance amidst chaos. Chapter 6. The Weight of Survival. In the human camp, a sense of expectation hung in the air as the community members waited for news from the battlefield. Around a small fire, Elena, Alex, and Captain Knox discussed the future in hushed tones, contemplating the prospect of peace after the defeat of the undead army. With the Alpha's kingdom in ruins, and now potentially the undead army, we might finally have a chance at a normal life again. Elena mused, hope glinting in her eyes. Captain Knox nodded in agreement, but it was Alex who captured the essence of their struggle. You know, my whole life has felt like a constant battle. Just when I thought I was getting somewhere, life would knock me down. But I always remembered that quote, "What does not kill us makes us stronger." I believed that no one else could endure what I had to, so I always told life to bring it on. Whenever things got tough, I'd challenge them, asking if that was the best they could do. He paused, looking into the fire. The state of the world now, it's like the ultimate test of that philosophy. But what I've realized is that there are no rainbows waiting for us. No matter what we do, something or someone is always there, ready to kick us in the teeth. The others nodded, understanding the hard truth in his words. Alex continued, "We have to be ready for whatever comes next, and I know deep down that whatever it is, it won't be enough to take me down. It won't be enough to take any of us down. We've come too far and fought too hard." The chapter closed on this somber, yet defiant note. In Crimson Dawn, echoes of darkness, the constant struggle for survival had forged a resilience in the camp's members. They were united not just by circumstance, but by a shared determination to withstand whatever challenges the world threw at them. As they waited for news from the battlefield, they prepared for the next chapter in their fight for survival, knowing full well that peace was often just the lull before the next storm. Chapter 7. The Test of Power. On the desolate battlefield, tension crackled in the air as the elders contemplated the necromancer's proposal. Finally breaking the silence, Varric addressed him with a blend of skepticism and curiosity. "How can we trust you? What stops us from simply destroying you right here and now?" The necromancer met Varric's gaze unflinchingly. "You can't," he stated flatly. "Your powers may work on these lesser undead, but had I sent my elite fighters, your shadow forms would have been ineffective." One of the elders, doubtful, challenged him. "You're bluffing." Without hesitation, the necromancer stepped forward, a challenge in his stance. "If your powers can fail me, then this meeting is merely a ruse. But if I remain unaffected by your most potent weapon, perhaps you should seriously consider my offer." In response, the elders moved with supernatural speed, their shadow forms slicing through the air towards the necromancer. The battlefield held its breath as their shadows passed through him, but he remained standing, utterly unaffected. The necromancer looked at the elders, his expression one of vindication. "As I suspected," he began, "your powers are ineffective against me. This is because of the unique interaction between my genetic structure and the virus. When I was transformed into what I am now, my extensive knowledge in genetics and genealogy allowed me to manipulate my own evolution. I engineered myself to be immune to your shadow manipulation." He continued, "Your powers rely on a specific interaction with living cells, and those infected by the standard virus strain. My cells have evolved beyond that, making them impervious to your influence." The chapter ended with the elders absorbing this revelation, their stance shifting from one of aggression to cautious consideration. The necromancer's immunity to their powers introduced a new dynamic to the confrontation. The once clear lines between predator and prey, strength and weakness, were now blurred. Crimson Dawn, Echoes of Darkness, was unfolding into a complex narrative of power, survival, and the unanticipated consequences of meddling with the very essence of life and death. Chapter 8. The Rising Tide. In the human camp, days had passed with no word from the elders, and worry had begun to set in among the leaders. Gathered in the main tent, Elena, Alex and Captain Knox discussed the unnerving silence. "It's not like the elders to be gone this long without contact," Elena said, a note of concern in her voice. "They would have needed to feed again by now. We must assume the worst, that they have been defeated." Panic rippled through the camp at this realization. Without the elders, their main line of defense against the undead seemed perilously thin. "Without the elders, we are surely doomed against the undead," murmured one of the camp members, echoing the fear of many. Alex stepped forward, his posture one of determination. "If the elders have indeed fallen, it wasn't before they helped us build better defenses and a sustainable camp," he declared. "With the added defenses and the knowledge they shared, maybe it's time we stopped relying on others and started relying on ourselves." Miles away, in the seclusion of a hidden forest, a group of werewolves had established a new den under the Alpha's leadership. The Alpha, aware of its dwindling numbers, recognized the urgent need to strengthen its pack, and the human camp had now become a prime target. At that moment, 2 werewolves burst into the den, carrying a collection of limbs and body parts from their recent encounters with the undead. Each piece was coated in the mysterious greenish goo. Laying them out before the Alpha, the werewolves awaited their leader's command. The Alpha, its eyes fixed on the goo-covered remains, directed the werewolves already affected by the substance to consume more of it. As they did, a transformation began. The werewolves grew in size and strength, evolving into more formidable beings. One werewolf, in particular, underwent a drastic change, growing to tower over the rest of the pack, including the Alpha. It had become a werewolf abomination, a monstrous embodiment of power and ferocity. The chapter closed on this ominous development. Back in the human camp, the community braced for a future without the elders, rallying around their newfound resolve to depend on themselves. Meanwhile, in the forest, the Alpha's pack had evolved into something far more dangerous, setting the stage for a new chapter in the ongoing struggle for survival in Crimson Dawn, Echoes of Darkness. Chapter 9. The Ominous Visitor. An urgent alarm resonated throughout the human camp, jolting everyone into high alert. "Something's coming!" shouted a lookout, his voice laced with alarm. The camp scrambled into defense mode, prepared to face whatever threat loomed. Without warning, a colossal figure crashed through the surrounding forest. It was a werewolf of unprecedented size, its fur tinged with a sickly green hue. Standing as tall as the trees, it effortlessly pushed them aside, making its way towards the camp's defensive barriers. The camp's members stared in disbelief at the sheer magnitude of the creature. Once it reached the barrier, the behemoth paused, its massive form casting a shadow over the camp. "Fire!" commanded Eleanor, and the camp responded in unison. Arrows tipped with silver, particle grenades, slingshots, and every available weapon were launched at the gigantic werewolf, but to their dismay, the onslaught seemed to have no effect The creature remained unscathed, an unmovable force of nature. Yet strangely, it made no move to attack. It simply stood there, as if observing them. After a tense standoff, the creature turned and lumbered away, disappearing from whence it came. Relief swept over the camp as they cheered, believing they had repelled the creature. But amidst the celebration, Alex approached Elena with a concerned expression. "We didn't hurt it, not even a scratch," he said, his voice heavy with doubt. "That thing could have torn through us with ease. Why did it just leave? Was it assessing our defenses?" Elena nodded, sharing his apprehension. "We need to prepare for the worst. This might just be the beginning." The chapter closed with the camp grappling with the implications of this encounter. With the elders missing, the undead army consolidating power in their metropolis, and the emergence of the giant werewolf, the balance of power was shifting in this dark world. Crimson Dawn, echoes of darkness, ended this part of the saga with a sense of foreboding, leaving the fate of the camp, and indeed the world, shrouded in uncertainty. Chapter 1. The Necromancer's Lab. In the heart of the undead metropolis, a strange alliance formed as the elders found themselves within the Necromancer's domain. They walked through a labyrinth of corridors, each turn revealing more of the Necromancer's macabre laboratory. Around them were vats of bubbling liquids, shelves lined with arcane tomes, and tables strewn with various biological specimens. The Necromancer, Dr. Stephen Lestat, led the elders with an air of pride, gesturing to his elaborate setup. "Here lies the culmination of my life's work and unlife's curiosity, the exploration and manipulation of genetics, genealogy, and biology. These disciplines have allowed me to create and sustain life, or a semblance of it, within my creations," he explained, his voice resonating with a mixture of madness and genius. Varric, representing the elders, observed the surroundings with a mixture of fascination and skepticism. "Your achievements in the field of reanimation are indeed remarkable," he conceded, "but we question your motives. Why reveal all this to us? What is your end game?" The Necromancer met Varric's inquiry with a knowing smile. "My motives are simple. In a world ravaged by chaos, we, the evolved beings, must seek our own path to survival and supremacy." As the tour continued, one of the elders interrupted, a note of urgency in their voice. "We will soon require sustenance. Our need to feed grows." The Necromancer nodded, as if expecting this. "The hunger that plagues your kind is a curse I have long studied. I believe I may offer a solution to your perpetual thirst for blood. But first, you must feed." He motioned to an undead servant, who promptly left the room. Moments later, the servant returned, dragging a screaming human. The person's terror filled the chamber as they were presented to the elders. "Eat up," the Necromancer urged, his eyes flickering with an unreadable emotion. "And once you finish this meal, we have more to discuss." Driven by an innate hunger, the elders descended upon the human, their feeding frenzied yet methodical. Within moments, the human collapsed, lifeless on the floor. The chapter closed with the elders, their hunger temporarily satiated, turning back to the Necromancer. their expressions a mix of gratitude and wariness. The necromancer's promise of freedom from their eternal hunger hung in the air, a tantalizing yet potentially dangerous prospect. Chapter 2. The Rise of Humanity. In the human camp, the air was thick with tension and unease. Rumors and whispers of fear spread like wildfire among the camp members, each person grappling with the uncertainty of survival without the elders. The recent encounter with the gigantic werewolf only exacerbated their anxiety. In the command tent, Alex, Eleanor, Captain Knox and other camp leaders gathered for a crucial strategy meeting. The weight of their situation was palpable. Alex, his resolve hardening, broke the silence. We've got to stop relying on others for our survival. We've been overrun by lichens, attacked by the undead, and we've even stood our ground against undead werewolves. Yet, here we are, doubting ourselves just because the elders aren't here. Our reliance on them has made us fear our own strength. It's time for humanity to reclaim its place as the dominant species on this planet. Elena nodded in agreement, but the concern in her voice was evident. I agree, Alex, but how do we achieve this? How do we stand against such overwhelming odds? Alex leaned forward, his eyes alight with strategic planning. We need a two-pronged approach. First, we explore the rumors of government research centers. They were reportedly working on advanced weaponry to combat lichens and the undead. If these rumors are true, those weapons could be the edge we need. Captain Knox chimed in, her experience as a military strategist lending credibility to her words. In my former unit, we heard whispers of these projects. They were high-risk, high-reward operations, but I don't think they ever reached completion. What if we can finish what they started? Alex continued. And secondly, we need to keep the werewolves and the undead focused on each other, not us. I propose we assembled two teams, one to draw the werewolves' attention and the other to provoke the undead. If we can lead them to clash with each other, it will give us the breathing space we need. The room fell silent as the leaders absorbed Alex's plan. It was bold, risky, but it was a spark of hope in an otherwise dark situation. A plan that could pivot the scales in their favor and reclaim their place in a world that had been torn away from them. The camp began to buzz with a renewed sense of purpose. Teams were formed, plans were drawn, and the seeds of a daring strategy were planted. Chapter 3. The Plan in Motion. Alex's team, after meticulously following the trail of destruction left by the gigantic werewolf, managed to locate the den of the werewolf pack deep in the forest. Meanwhile, Captain Knox, with her keen military acumen, conducted a thorough reconnaissance of the undead metropolis. Days of stealthy observation yielded valuable intelligence on both factions. Upon reconvening at the camp, Alex shared his findings. The distance between the werewolf den and the undead metropolis is too vast. Leading them to collide is going to be a challenge, he admitted. As the group pondered over this obstacle, one of the camp's engineers, named Jenna, stepped forward with a solution. We've been working on some vehicles, repurposing old cars with the fuel we've managed to scavenge. They're fast and should be more than capable of outrunning the werewolves and drawing the undead, she explained, pointing to a few rugged-looking vehicles parked nearby. Captain Knox's eyes lit up with strategic possibilities. That's brilliant. With these, we can lead the werewolves directly into the undead army, she said. Alex nodded, a determined smile crossing his face. You know, this might actually work, he mused, already formulating the plan in his head. Simultaneously, two engineers from the camp, whom everyone knew as Marco and Lydia, embarked on a separate mission in another vehicle. They were determined to verify the existence of the rumoured advanced weaponry. Skeptical, but driven by the trust in their leaders, they set out towards the coordinates of the supposed government research centre. If those weapons existed, we would have seen them in action by now, Marco said, steering the vehicle through the deserted streets. Lydia, always the optimist, chimed in. But if there's even a slight chance, we owe it to our camp to check it out. Imagine if we could bring back something that changes the tide in our favour. The chapter closed with the camp abuzz with activity and hope. Alex and Captain Knox began preparing their teams for the daring mission to draw the two monstrous factions into a direct confrontation. Meanwhile, Marco and Lydia journeyed towards a destination shrouded in mystery. Their mission, a gamble on a slim hope. Chapter 4. Convergence of Forces. In the depths of the forest, the werewolf den buzzed with a primal urgency. The Alpha, driven by the need to expand its pack, readied its group for an assault on the human camp. With its most powerful allies by its side, 2 mutated werewolves and the colossal werewolf abomination, it set out towards the camp, confident in its impending victory. Back in the undead metropolis, the necromancer was deep in his latest experiment, one that promised to alter the very essence of the Elders' existence. His goal was ambitious, to free them from their bloodlust and potentially unlock greater powers within them. On the outskirts of the metropolis, the once silent streets were filled with the blaring sounds of rock music. Captain Knox, sitting in a rebuilt car, blared the tunes as she mock-played an air guitar. Her antics drew the attention of the undead. Within moments, a horde began to converge on her position. Smirking, she slammed the car into gear, leading the undead masses away towards a predetermined location. Meanwhile, in the woods, as the werewolves reached a crossroads, the sound of a car horn echoed through the trees. The Alpha, sensing an opportunity, commanded its pack to give chase while it remained behind. With 2 pure werewolves, Alex, behind the wheel of another rebuilt car, floored the accelerator, leading the werewolves on a wild chase towards the same location Captain Knox was heading. The pursuit was intense. The werewolves, with their unnatural speed, began to close the gap on Alex's vehicle. The ground trembled under the thunderous steps of the gigantic werewolf and added an earthquake-like tremor to the chase. As Alex neared the rendezvous point, he could see the undead horde in the distance. Captain Knox, spotting Alex's vehicle with the werewolves hot on its tail, knew the moment of convergence was near. The undead, though slower, were steadily advancing towards them. With impeccable timing, both Alex and Captain Knox swerved their vehicles away at the last moment, leaving the werewolves and the undead to collide in a catastrophic melee. The 2 monstrous factions, now faced with each other, launched into a ferocious battle, their attention diverted from the human camp. The chapter closed with the werewolves and undead locked in combat, their roars and snarls filling the air. Chapter 5. The Turn of the Tide. On the battlefield, a scene of unparalleled ferocity unfolded as the undead zombies and their mutated counterparts clashed with the werewolves. The mutated werewolves, embodying a ruthless savagery, tore through the undead ranks with brutal efficiency. The gigantic werewolf, an unstoppable force of nature, moved through the undead, each step crushing them under its immense weight. In the midst of the chaos, a single Lycan broke away from the melee. Its mission was clear: to return to the Alpha and report the outcome of the battle. The Lycan sped through the forest, its senses alert for any sign of danger. Back at the site of the confrontation, the balance of power had shifted dramatically. The sheer might and ferocity of the werewolves, especially the monstrous abomination, proved too much for the undead horde. Even the larger, more formidable undead fell under the relentless onslaught of claw and fang. What had started as a pitched battle soon turned into a one-sided rout, with the werewolves emerging as the clear victors. As the lichen prepared to continue its journey back to the Alpha, a distant sound caught its attention, the unmistakable beeping of car horns. Alex and Captain Knox, observing the outcome of the battle from a safe distance, had initiated the next phase of their plan. The werewolves, upon hearing the sound, instinctively gave chase, their predatory nature driving them forward. The two cars, driven by Alex and Captain Knox, sped off towards the undead metropolis, leading the werewolf pack away from the human camp. The chapter closed with the werewolves in pursuit of the cars, unknowingly being lured towards the necromancer's domain. This strategic maneuver by the humans had successfully pitted the two monstrous factions against each other, buying the camp precious time. Chapter 6. The Necromancer's Bargain. Inside the Necromancer's laboratory, deep within the undead metropolis, a groundbreaking development was unfolding. The Necromancer, having worked meticulously with the Elders, revealed a small bottle filled with a greenish liquid. "This," he announced, "is the key to your liberation. A mere dose of this liquid can sustain your strength and power for a month without the need to feed on human blood. It will enhance your abilities, making you stronger and faster than ever before. Imagine what a whole vat could do, sustain you for years." The Elders, gathered around the Necromancer, looked on in a mix of disbelief and awe. The implications of such a discovery were monumental. Varric, the most ancient among them, stepped forward, his voice echoing with centuries of wisdom and caution. "If what you say is true, we would be free from the curse of hunger that has plagued us for an eternity. But I have lived long enough to know that such gifts are rarely given freely. What is it that you want from us in return?" The Necromancer's smile broadened, revealing a glimpse of his strategic mind. "My desire is simple, to enlist your help in defeating both the humans and the lichens. With your enhanced abilities and freedom from the hunger, we can reshape this world, making it a place where our kind can thrive unchallenged." The revelation hung heavily in the air, a proposition that could alter the very nature of the Elders' existence. The offer was tempting, the possibility of liberation from their eternal hunger an alluring prospect, yet the price, turning against the humans, who had become their unlikely allies in survival, presented a moral quandary. The chapter closed on this moment of decision, with the Elders weighing the consequences of accepting the Necromancer's offer. Chapter 7. The Alpha's Call. The tension in the undead metropolis reached a fever pitch as the ground began to tremble beneath them. It felt as if the very earth was protesting the presence of such monstrous creatures. The inhabitants of the city, already creatures of the undead, stirred restlessly, sensing an impending threat. At the forefront of the city, a towering figure emerged, the gigantic werewolf, its immense size and greenish fur making it a terrifying spectacle. Accompanied by its mutated pack, the beast seemed unstoppable as it ploughed through the undead army, rending zombies and other creatures asunder with ease. From a vantage point, the Necromancer and the Elders watched the unfolding chaos. The sight of the gigantic werewolf and its pack approaching the heart of the city was a scene of apocalyptic proportions. Just as the werewolves were about to launch a full-scale invasion into the city, a deep, ancient howl echoed in the distance. Silhouetted against the horizon was the Alpha, its presence commanding way even from afar. Upon hearing the Alpha's call, the werewolf pack, including the gigantic behemoth, ceased their assault and abruptly turned, exiting the city with a renewed sense of purpose. The necromancer, observing from his high vantage, murmured, "This changes a few things." The sight of the gigantic werewolf had clearly left an impression on him, a rare moment where his confident demeanor faltered. From a distance, Captain Knox and Alex, through their binoculars, witnessed the elders standing beside the necromancer. "Traitors," Alex muttered under his breath, a mix of disappointment and anger in his voice. They knew it was time to head back to the camp with this crucial information. As the werewolves retreated and the undead forces re-established their positions in the metropolis, a sense of unease settled over the city, leaving the future actions of the Alpha and its pack, as well as the intentions of the necromancer and the elders, shrouded in mystery. Chapter 8. The Hidden Military Base. The two engineers, Marco and Lydia, drove up to what looked like an abandoned military site, now overrun by nature. Vines clung to the structures, and grass sprouted through cracks in the concrete. A few decayed bodies lay scattered around, grim reminders of the chaos that had ensued during the early days of the outbreak. The main entrance to the base was a massive, securely locked door. "Let's look around for a keycard or some other way to get this door open," Marco suggested, scanning the area for any useful items. But to their surprise, the door suddenly slid open with a low mechanical groan. They exchanged a puzzled glance before Lydia said, "Well, let's go in," her voice tinged with a mix of curiosity and caution. As soon as they stepped inside, a group of armed guards appeared, instructing them to drop their weapons. They were then led deeper into the base, moving through a series of winding corridors. Eventually, they were brought into a room where they met the group's leader, a scientist who had been working on ways to repel the undead and lichens since the calamity began. "We've deliberately made the outside look abandoned and have been in hiding ever since," the scientist explained. "We lost our external communication capabilities, and our scouts reported the increasing danger of the undead and lichens, so we decided to lay low here." He gestured to the walls, lined with blueprints and diagrams. "We've been working on developing weapons based on the old government's plans, weapons designed to counter both werewolves and the undead. However, the designs are incomplete. The person who conceptualized these was a genius, a mind that comes once in a generation. They left everything here, but we lack the final pieces to complete these weapons." Marco and Lydia listened intently, realizing the gravity of the situation. The potential to change the tide of the ongoing battles lay within these walls, but the missing link in the weapons development posed a significant hurdle. As the chapter closed, Marco and Lydia knew they had stumbled upon something that could be pivotal for the human camp's survival. They also realized the challenge that lay ahead, to find the missing elements that could bring these theoretical super weapons to life. Chapter 9. The Mysterious Stranger. Marco and Lydia enthusiastically spoke of their camp, describing its functional defenses and the cohesive community that had formed. "We've been able to maintain a strong defense, and we always welcome new members and fighters. You'd all be valuable additions," Marco said with a hopeful tone. The scientist, along with the other members of the hidden base, listened intently. The prospect of leaving their self-imposed prison was both exciting and daunting. "We've been trapped in this base for so long, it's felt like a prison. We've exhausted all our knowledge trying to finish these weapons, and we're running low on both rations and ammunition," the scientist confessed. A decision was made to depart for Marco and Lydia's camp. As they gathered the blueprints and loaded them into the car, Lydia noticed a peculiar figure in the distance, perched atop a wall. The figure, clad in tattered clothes and a chrome mask, stood up and began walking towards them. As he approached, the group could see the wear and tear on his clothes, suggesting a life of hardship and survival. He pointed to one of the diagrams that they were loading. "You may take most of that, but that particular diagram must stay here," he said in a voice that commanded attention. Marco and Lydia exchanged confused looks, while the others from the base emerged, curious about the stranger's sudden appearance. The masked man continued, "That diagram was a failure, a dead end. It will only waste your time. The others, however, could lead you to the completion of the weapons, provided you're smart enough to decipher them." Intrigued, Marco asked, "How do you know all this?" The stranger's reply was simple and startling. "I drew them." The chapter closed on this intriguing revelation. The mysterious stranger, the apparent architect of the weapons designs, had just entered the scene, adding another layer of complexity to the situation. His knowledge and expertise could be the key to completing the weapons and potentially turning the tide in the human struggle for survival. Chapter 10. The Creator's Creed. Marco's question hung in the air, laden with hope. "If you drew these, then you know how to finish the weapon." "I did finish it," the stranger replied, his voice even. "But everything there is government property. I left it as it was not mine to take." Marco, struggling to comprehend, asked, "If you had completed the weapon, you could have saved humanity." The stranger's response was tinged with bitterness. "I never felt it was worth saving. The government treated me as an object, a drone for their purposes. They used me to create power for themselves, not for the good of mankind. I saw the corruption, how power was wielded not to help, but to control. Power that I gave them." Lydia interjected, "But what about everyone else? What happened to them without that weapon?" "Exactly what they deserved," the stranger answered. "The system was so corrupt, it would have destroyed itself eventually. The virus just hastened the process. With the government, the financial systems, the endless debt, it all had to fall. So, I left everything they paid me for and moved on. The weapon works, but I refused to let them hold my brain, my creations, hostage." The scientist from the lab, intrigued and desperate, asked, "Who are you? And if you can create such a weapon, you can save us all." The stranger shook his head slightly. "I'm not in the business of saving others, but if you can figure out how to finish the weapon based on those plans, maybe you can save yourselves." Lydia stepped forward, her voice earnest. "There's no government anymore, no system looking to chain you. The world you knew has fallen. The people you see before you, we were the ones chained by the system. Now we're fighting not against control, but against extinction, against real threats, the undead, the werewolves." The stranger paused, taking in Lydia's words. His gaze shifted from one person to another, each a living testament to survival and resilience in a world gone mad. The chapter closed with the stranger considering Lydia's plea. His creations, born from a brilliant yet unwilling mind, held the potential to change the course of the human struggle. Chapter 11. The Reluctant Genius. The conversation with the stranger had reached an impasse, his resolve unshaken. He remained adamant in his refusal to assist them, reiterating that his intellect was not a commodity to be exploited by others. With heavy hearts, the group began packing up the blueprints and diagrams they had gathered, preparing to leave the abandoned military site. As they made their way out, the stranger stood silently, his chrome mask reflecting the fading light watching them depart with an inscrutable gaze. Just as the group was about to leave, Marco, driven by curiosity and a flicker of hope, asked, what could the weapon do if we were able to complete it? The stranger paused, his head tilting slightly as if weighing the implications of his response. It could disrupt brainwaves and patterns, particularly effective against the undead. Its radius could cover miles in a single activation. I also tested it on the lichens, and it was effective. That's why I'm still alive after all this time. The scientist's eyes widened in realization. You mean you have a working model of this weapon already built? He asked incredulously. The stranger raised his hand, revealing a crude metal glove. Yes, he confirmed, his voice low but clear. Lydia stepped forward, her expression earnest. Like you said, it's your mind, your creation. Only you can decide if what remains of humanity is worth saving. But just so you know, if you ever needed us to, we would save you. The chapter concluded with the group leaving the military site, their minds swirling with possibilities and the weight of the stranger's revelation. The existence of a working model of the weapon, held by a lone genius who had renounced humanity, added a new layer of complexity to their struggle for survival. Crimson Dawn, Resurgence of the Shadow, continued to unfold, a story of survival, moral dilemmas, and the quest for a glimmer of hope in a world consumed by darkness and despair. Chapter 12. The Turn of the Tide. After some time on the road, Marco and Lydia arrived back at the base, immediately requesting additional transport to bring in the new members they had found at the abandoned military site. The camp, buzzing with activity and anticipation, welcomed the newcomers, bolstering their ranks and morale. However, their moment of hope was swiftly interrupted by the blaring alarm. A massive horde of undead was approaching the camp. The wave of terror comprised zombies, undead abominations, spider-like creatures, and larger, more formidable undead. With relentless ferocity, they launched themselves against the camp's defenses. As the battle raged, the camp's defenses began to falter under the unending assault. The sheer number of the undead seemed infinite, each fallen creature replaced by another. But then, abruptly, the onslaught ceased. Every undead creature, mid-attack, froze in place. An eerie stillness fell over the battlefield. Moments later, the entire horde collapsed to the ground lifeless, as if an unseen switch had been flipped off. Amidst the fallen undead, a lone figure emerged, the stranger with the chrome mask. Walking calmly through the carnage, he approached the stunned defenders of the camp. "Okay, I'll give this a go," he announced, "but nobody gets my weapon unless you figure it out yourselves. Prepare the best tent and bring food. I'm hungry." The chapter and the part of the saga closed on this dramatic intervention. The stranger's sudden decision to assist and his mysterious ability to deactivate the undead en masse marked a pivotal turning point. The camp was left in awe and relief, their immediate threat vanquished by this enigmatic savior. Crimson Dawn, Resurgence of the Shadow, ended, setting the stage for the next part of this epic saga, where survival, innovation, and the mysteries of human and inhuman capabilities continued to intertwine in a world forever changed. Chapter 1. the genesis of a revolution. In the quiet confines of his laboratory, Professor Simon Winter, a renowned expert in the field of electromagnetic brain activity, was on the verge of a breakthrough. His life's work had revolved around the intricate dance of neurons and electrical impulses that made up the human brain. Professor Winter had been pioneering a treatment for Alzheimer's, harnessing the power of electromagnetic waves to forge new neural pathways, a hope for millions suffering from the debilitating disease. His research illustrated how the brain, running on subtle electric impulses, could be influenced and healed using targeted electromagnetic waves. The promise his work held for Alzheimer's was groundbreaking, offering a potential path to restoring memory and cognitive function. However, as Professor Winter immersed himself in his research, the world outside his laboratory began to unravel. Reports started flooding in of terrifying attacks by creatures of myth werewolves, ripping through cities and countryside alike. The chaos only escalated when a new threat emerged: the undead, or zombies, as they came to be known, shambling hordes of once humans now driven by a mindless hunger. As society crumbled under these relentless assaults, government agencies, desperate to maintain control and order, enlisted Professor Winter. They saw his research as a potential weapon, a way to manipulate brain activity, not just for healing, but for control. The professor, initially oblivious to their true intentions, was soon ensnared in their schemes. He was forced to pivot his research towards application that could serve the government's agenda. The agencies showed no interest in the welfare of the people. Their only focus was on retaining power. Professor Winter and his team were treated as pawns, their skills exploited to develop technologies aimed at controlling both the werewolf and zombie threats for the government's benefit. Professor Winter found himself trapped in a moral quagmire. His groundbreaking research, meant to be a beacon of hope for humanity, was now at risk of being twisted into a tool of domination. Chapter 2. The Spark of Rebellion. Time marched on in a world besieged by chaos, and within the confines of a high-security government facility, Professor Simon Winter worked tirelessly. Amid the tumult, he experienced a eureka moment, a breakthrough in his weapon research that could potentially turn the tide against the supernatural forces ravaging the world. Yet, as he witnessed the government's self-serving motives, he began to harbor doubts about the true purpose of his work. The government agencies, driven by a relentless thirst for power, showed little concern for the populace they were supposed to protect. Realizing his groundbreaking work was being exploited not to save humanity, but to control it, Professor Winter made a fateful decision. He withdrew his cooperation, refusing to hand over the final breakthrough. In response, the government agents, desperate to harness his genius, locked him in a cell. "You must give us the completion of the weapon," they demanded, their voices laced with frustration and greed. Professor Winter, resolute and unyielding, faced them with defiance. "The plans are there for all to see. Why don't you build it yourself?" he challenged. An agent, visibly angered, retorted, "The plans, yes, but the final piece is missing." With a calm yet firm tone, Winter replied, "Indeed, the final piece is my mind. I solved the problem. It's mine. You can imprison me, you can even take my life, but you will never own my mind." At that moment, the facility was besieged by an onslaught of undead. The government forces, caught off guard, rushed outside to defend the base against the unexpected attack. Seizing the opportunity amidst the chaos, Professor Winter made his escape. He took only his personal possessions, leaving behind everything provided by the government, including the diagrams of the weapon. In a secret location, far from the prying eyes of the government and the horrors of the world, Professor Winter set to work. With unwavering determination, he continued his research, his hands guided by years of expertise and a mind unshackled by external influence. He completed the weapon, a testament to human ingenuity and the indomitable spirit of a free mind. Professor Winter, a lone figure, standing against the backdrop of a world in turmoil, holding in his hands the key to potential salvation. Chapter 3. The Game of Shadows and Light. In the undead metropolis, a gathering of sinister importance took place. The necromancer, surrounded by the elders, conveyed his urgent need for their assistance. We must destroy the humans before the Lycans convert them into their kin, but something is amiss. The humans have found a way to decimate my legions without direct combat. I am intrigued to learn how. I need you to find out. Infiltrate the human camp. Gather this information for me. The elders, bound by a sense of indebtedness to the necromancer for relieving their eternal hunger, agreed to his request. As they departed for the human camp, the necromancer's lips curled into a subtle, knowing grin. Meanwhile, at the human camp, in the command center, Alex, Eleanor, and Captain Knox were deep in discussion when suddenly 4 shadowy figures materialized within the tent. The elders had arrived. Varric, the eldest, spoke first. We bear no ill will towards you, but we must discover how you neutralized an entire legion of undead. Alex, his expression hardening, responded, You turned your back on us for the undead. We have nothing to share with you. One of the elders, revealing a hint of menace, countered, You realize we could easily annihilate your camp. We no longer need you for sustenance. Why not cooperate and live? At that moment, the stranger with the chrome mask entered the tent. I am the one you seek, he announced calmly. I'll grant you an audience. Varric turned to face the newcomer. So, you possess the power to incapacitate the undead? I am Winter, the stranger replied coolly. I do as I please. Another elder, sensing an opportunity, threatened. We will extract this ability from you, by force if necessary. Winter chuckled softly. Many have tried to take what does not belong to them. You are mere shadows. Do not provoke me, or I might just turn on the lights. As an elder shifted into a shadow, preparing to attack, Winter clicked a button on a small device. A combination of infrared, visible light, and ultraviolet light flooded the room. The elders screamed in agony, collapsing to the floor, overwhelmed by the simulated sunlight. You should know, sunlight comprises infrared, visible light, and ultraviolet light. Winter lectured, his voice calm but firm, all of which happened to be my areas of expertise. Flicking off the device, he added, I could end you all right now, but I have no desire for destruction. However, should you return, my courtesy will have its limits. As the elders hastily retreated from the tent, the camp leaders were left in silent awe of Winter's capabilities and resolve. Chapter 4. The Reluctant Genius. In the command tent of the camp, an air of uncertainty swirled around Professor Winter. The events of the day weighed heavily on him. I've been here for one day, and have already found myself in conflict, he stated, his tone laced with disappointment. This arrangement may be short-lived. I think it's best for me to take my leave. Alex, realizing the gravity of losing such a vital ally, quickly interjected. Wait, Winter, we genuinely need your expertise. Winter turned, his chrome mask reflecting the dim light of the tent. That's the problem, isn't it? Everyone always wants something. Instead of relying on their own intellect, they seek to use the power of another. It's always about controlling another mind to fulfill one's needs. I won't be part of such games." He paused, then continued, "And I warn you, do not attempt to follow me. My ability to incapacitate extends to humans as well. However, your undead friends will likely give you a wide berth for a while." With that, he tossed the tube containing the combination of infrared, visible light, and ultraviolet light to them. "Use this for your negotiations," he added. Elena, looking concerned, mentioned another looming threat. "There's also the matter of that gigantic werewolf creature. We have no means to stop something like that." Winter, his tone unchanging, replied, "That's correct. You don't." Without another word, he turned and walked out of the tent, leaving the group to ponder his parting gift and the ominous reality of the challenges ahead. The chapter concluded with Winter's departure, leaving behind a mix of awe, confusion, and a newfound tool in the tube of light. His brief presence had made a significant impact, but his sudden exit left the camp to face their dire situation with one less extraordinary mind to aid them. Chapter 5. The Tangled Web. In the undead metropolis, an air of frustration pervaded the necromancer's lair. The Elder's report had done little to appease his growing concerns. They recounted their defeat, detailing their encounter with Winter and the surprising ease with which they were overpowered. The necromancer's anger flared upon hearing their account. "First, the Lycans have something over us, and now even the humans, whom we considered the weakest threat, have gained an upper hand. This is unacceptable. We need to drastically rethink our strategies," he declared, his voice echoing through the dark chambers. His mind raced with possibilities. "We need a counter to that gigantic Lycan, the Alpha's monstrous creation. It's obviously a result of the Lycan curse, combined with some kind of gene acceleration liquid. I need to get my hands on a Lycan specimen," he mused, his thoughts already turning to new experiments. Turning to the Elders, he proposed, "Perhaps you can redeem yourselves by assisting me in this endeavor." The Elders, still reeling from their recent defeat and eager to regain favor, nodded in agreement, recognizing the urgency of the necromancer's request. Later that night, the Elders gathered in secret, their voices low and filled with concern. "The Lycans are unaffected by our shadow forms, and they can easily overpower us. We need to approach this task with utmost caution," one elder murmured. Varric stepped forward, his expression grave. "We are now wholly reliant on the necromancer. A realignment with the humans is out of the question, and if we were to fend for ourselves, we would surely starve. Yet the prospect of confronting the Lycans poses a significant risk. I cannot recall a single instance where one of our kind has triumphed against those creatures. We have indeed set ourselves upon a path fraught with troubles." Chapter 6. The Confrontation. The Elders, harnessing their shadow forms, moved swiftly and silently through the dense woods, homing in on the Alpha's location. Their journey, however, was abruptly interrupted by an unexpected presence. There, trudging through the woods with an air of regal power and a chrome mask reflecting the moonlight, was Winter. In the distance, a Lycan from the Alpha's patrol detected Winter's scent. With a guttural growl, it launched into a ferocious charge, teeth bared menacingly. The creature's movement was a blur of deadly intent as it closed the distance. The Elders, hidden in the shadows, watched intently, curious about the outcome of this inevitable clash. Just as the Lycan leapt into the air for a fatal strike, it suddenly stopped mid-air and collapsed to the ground, motionless. Winter, seemingly unfazed, continued on his path as if nothing had occurred. One of the Elders, amazed by the display of power, whispered, "Such power. If only we could harness it for ourselves. As they spoke, Winter abruptly stopped. He did not turn towards them, but the pause was enough to suggest he was aware of their presence. After a moment, he resumed walking. Did he know they lurked in the shadows? Varric, ever cautious, whispered, "Let's retrieve the Lycan. Forget the human. He's too powerful, despite his mortal form." The elders then set about dragging the fallen Lycan away. Suddenly, Winter's voice pierced the silence. "Hungry?" He stood before them, his tone almost mocking. The elders looked up, their expressions akin to those of thieves caught in the act. Winter, perceptive and unthreatened, observed. "Doing his dirty work, I see. You know, you could aspire to be so much more." After a brief pause, he gestured towards the Lycan. "Take it. Consider it a gift." With those final words, Winter walked off, leaving the elders in a state of contemplation. They were indeed pawns in the necromancer's game, a realization that weighed heavily on them. Yet, Winter's remarks lingered in their minds. Was there a chance for redemption? Could Winter, a seemingly powerful player in this dark game, offer them a path back to something greater than servitude? As the elders pondered their circumstances, trapped in a web of their own making, yet subtly offered a glimmer of hope by the enigmatic figure of Winter. Chapter 7. The eve of war. In the heart of the undead metropolis, the necromancer worked feverishly on the carcass of the deceased Lycan. His movements were rapid, his focus intense, as he dissected and analyzed, mumbling to himself in a mix of frustration and bewilderment. "How can it be?" he pondered aloud, searching for the elusive answer that could unlock the Lycan's secrets. After hours of exhaustive examination, he reached a moment of bitter realization. With a roar of anger, he hurled the Lycan's body off the operating table. "There's nothing, no biological explanation. It must be something else," he concluded, exasperated by the enigma. Forced to abandon his efforts, the necromancer turned his thoughts to an alternative strategy. The reports from the elders about Winter's departure from the human camp and the camp's potential vulnerability played on his mind. This is the perfect moment to strike before the Lycans can expand their ranks with the humans, he determined. The sound of impending warfare echoed through the undead metropolis. Legions of the undead were summoned, amassing for a final assault on the human camp. Wagons loaded with vats of green goo were readied, along with catapults primed to launch the substance when the time was right. The ground shook under the mass of marching undead, a macabre army on the move. Simultaneously, the Alpha mobilized its entire pack. The gigantic werewolf, its every step causing tremors, led the pack through the woods towards the human camp. The Alpha's plan was clear: to dominate the camp and claim the humans for their kind. Meanwhile, in the human camp, reports of movement from both the undead and the Lycans spurred frantic preparations for an imminent attack. The air was thick with tension as all factions braced for what seemed an inevitable clash that would determine the fate of the survivors. Perched on a distant hill, a solitary figure watched the unfolding drama with a detached curiosity. Professor Winter, the most potent entity in this game of survival, observed the converging forces with a mix of interest and ennui. To him, the upcoming battle was a mere unfolding of events, a chess game where he held the ultimate power, yet chose not to intervene. The stage was set for a climactic confrontation at the human camp, with all factions converging in a battle that promised to be both devastating and decisive. Winter, the enigmatic observer, remained aloof yet watchful, his involvement, or lack thereof, holding the potential to sway the outcome of this final battle. Chapter 8. Prelude to the final stand. As the tale of Crimson Dawn reaches its climactic threshold, anticipation builds for the final episode. The stage is set for a grand confrontation, with all factions poised on the brink of an all-out war. The human camp, fortified yet vulnerable, braces for the imminent clash with both the undead legions and the formidable Lycan pack. As the forces converge, questions hang in the air, charged with the electricity of impending conflict. Will there be a definitive victor in this struggle for survival, or will the battle see the fall of all factions, leaving a world in ruins? The final episode promises to reveal the fate of the human camp, the ambitions of the necromancer, the resolve of the Lycan Alpha, and the role of the enigmatic Professor Winter, the most powerful piece in this chessboard of apocalypse. Brace yourselves for the ultimate showdown, in a world where the lines between hero and villain blur, where survival is a daily gamble, and where power plays are as deadly as the creatures that roam the land. The finale is set to be a spectacle of strategy, strength, and the indomitable human spirit. The next episode, the finale of Crimson Dawn, is coming soon, promising to deliver an epic conclusion to this saga of darkness, light, and the shades in between. Stay tuned for the breathtaking conclusion, where the fate of a world hanging in the balance will finally be unveiled. Thank you for joining me on this chilling journey. If your thirst for the unknown and the unexplained is still unquenched, I invite you to delve deeper into the abyss of terror. Just beyond the veil of reality, another story awaits to send shivers down your spine. Dare to join me in the next video, where the unknown becomes known and the unseen seen. Until then, keep the lights dim and your mind open. This is Professor Shadow, signing off.